Kirk Douglas, born Issur Danielovitch, December 9, 1916, is an American actor, producer, director, and author. After an impoverished childhood with immigrant parents and 6 sisters, he had his film debut in The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, 1946, with Barbara Stanwyck. Douglas soon developed into a leading box office star throughout the 1950s and 1960s, known for doing serious dramas, including westerns and war movies. During a 60-year acting career, he has appeared in over 90 movies, and in 1960 was responsible for helping to end the Hollywood blacklist. In 1949, after a lead role as an unscrupulous boxing hero in Champion, for which he was nominated as Best Actor, Douglas became a star. His style of acting relied on expressing great concentration, realism, and powerful emotions, and he subsequently gravitated toward roles requiring strong characters. Among his early films were Young Man with a Horn, playing opposite Lauren Bacall, 1950, Billy Wilder's controversial Ace in the Hole, 1951, and Detective Story, 1951. He received a second Oscar nomination for his dramatic role in The Bad and the Beautiful, 1952, where he played opposite Lana Turner. And his powerful acting as Vincent van Gogh in Lust for Life, 1956, is considered one of his finest roles. He is one of the last living actors from the golden age of Hollywood. In 1955, he established Bryna Productions, which began producing films as varied as Paths of Glory, 1957, and Spartacus, 1960. In those 2 films, he starred and collaborated with then relatively unknown director, Stanley Kubrick. He produced and starred in Lonely Are the Brave, 1962, considered a cult classic, and 7 Days in May, 1964, opposite Burt Lancaster, with whom he made 7 films. In 1963, he starred in the Broadway play One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a story he purchased, which he later gave to his son Michael Douglas, who turned it into an Oscar-winning film. As an actor and philanthropist, Douglas has received 3 Academy Award nominations, an Oscar for Lifetime Achievement, and the Medal of Freedom. As an author, he has written 10 novels and memoirs. Currently, he is number 17 on the American Film Institute's list of the greatest male screen legends in American film history, and the highest-ranked living person on the list. After barely surviving a helicopter crash in 1991 and then suffering a stroke in 1996, he has focused on renewing his spiritual and religious life. He lives with Anne, his wife of over 60 years. Douglas was born Issur Danielovitch in Amsterdam, New York, the son of Bryna Bertha, née Sangel, and Herschel Harry Danielovitch, a businessman. His parents were Jewish immigrants from Chavyasy, Mogilev region, in the Russian Empire, now Belarus, and the family spoke Yiddish at home. His father's brother, who emigrated earlier, used the surname Dembski, which Douglas family adopted in the United States. Douglas grew up as Izzy Dembski and legally changed his name to Kirk Douglas before entering the Navy during World War II. In his 1988 autobiography, The Ragman's Son, Douglas notes the hardships that he, along with 6 sisters and his parents, endured during their early years in New York. My father, who had been a horse trader in Russia, got himself a horse and a small wagon, and became a ragman, buying old rags, pieces of metal, and junk for pennies, nickels, and dimes. Even on Eagle Street, in the poorest section of town, where all the families were struggling, the ragman was on the lowest rung on the ladder. And I was the ragman's son. Growing up, Douglas sold snacks to mill workers to earn enough to buy milk and bread to help his family. Later, he delivered newspapers and during his youth worked at more than 40 different jobs before getting a job acting. He found living in a family with 6 sisters to be stifling. I was dying to get out. In a sense, it lit a fire under me. In high school, after acting in plays, he then knew he wanted to become a professional actor. Unable to afford tuition, Douglas talked his way into St. Lawrence University and received a loan which he paid back by working part-time as a gardener and a janitor. He was a standout on the wrestling team, and wrestled one summer in a carnival to make money. Douglas' acting talents were noticed at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City, and he received a special scholarship. One of his classmates was Betty Joan Persk, later to become better known as Lauren Bacall, who would play an important role in launching his film career. Another classmate, and a friend of Bacall, was aspiring actress, Diana Dill, who would later become Douglas's wife. Bacall writes that she had a wild crush on Kirk, and they dated casually. During their time together, she learned that he had no money, and he once spent the night in jail as he had no place to sleep. She gave him her uncle's old coat to keep warm. I thought he must be frozen in the winter. He was thrilled and grateful. During that period she fantasized about someday sharing her personal and stage life with Douglas, but would later be disappointed. Kirk did not really pursue me. He was friendly and sweet, enjoyed my company, but I was clearly too young for him, she later wrote. Early career. While doing summer stock theater during a college term break, he began using the name Kirk Douglas, which he later legally adopted. He earned his first money as an actor that summer. Upon graduating from drama school, Douglas made his Broadway debut as a singing telegraph boy in Spring Again. In 1941, he enlisted in the United States Navy, shortly after the United States entered World War II, and was medically discharged for war injuries in 1944. He married Diana Dill on November 2, 1943. They had two sons, Michael in 1944 and Joel in 1947, before they divorced in 1951. After the war, Douglas returned to New York City and found work in radio, theater, and commercials. In his radio work, he acted in a number of network soap operas, and sees those experiences as being especially valuable, as skill in using one's voice is important for aspiring actors, and regrets that the same avenues are no longer open to them. His stage break occurred in Kiss and Tell, which led to other roles. Douglas had planned to remain a stage actor, until his friend, Lauren Bacall, helped him get his first film role by recommending him to director Hal Wallis, who was looking for a new male talent. Wallis's film, The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, 1946, with Barbara Stanwyck, became Douglas's debut screen appearance. He played a young, insecure man, stung with jealousy, whose life was dominated by a ruthless older woman, and he hid his feelings with alcohol. It would be the last time that Douglas portrayed a weakling in a film role. Reviewers of the film noted that Douglas already projected qualities of a natural film actor, with the similarity of this role with later ones explained by biographer Tony Thomas. His style and his personality came across on the screen, something that does not always happen, even with the finest actors. Douglas had, and has, a distinctly individual manner. He radiates a certain inexplicable quality, and it is this, as much as talent, that accounts for his success in films. At the time the film came out, adds Thomas, movie heroes were beginning to change from those portrayed before the war. Audiences now looked for a harder, more realistic working man hero. And Douglas, projecting a forceful and combative persona, exemplified the new anti-hero. He understood that portraying hard-nosed sons of bitches was an important aspect of a screen personality, and explained its value. I've always tried to show how a man got that way. The guy might not be any good, but you must understand him. Often, in my films, he's a rebel against society. Director George Stevens would later agree, when during his 1991 AFI tribute to Douglas, he stated, his special gift had been to show us the flaws in every hero and the virtues in every heel. Douglas stated that the keys to acting success are determination and application. You must know how to function and how to maintain yourself, and you must have a love of what you do. But an actor also needs great good luck. I have had that luck. Douglas had great vitality and explained that it takes a lot out of you to work in this business. Many people fall by the wayside because they don't have the energy to sustain their talent. That attitude toward acting became evident with Champion, 1949. From that one role, writes biographer John Parker, he went from stardom and entered the Super League, where his style was in marked contrast to Hollywood's other leading men at the time. His sudden rise to prominence is explained and compared to that of Jack Nicholson's. He virtually ignored interventionist directors. He prepared himself privately for each role he played, so that when the cameras were ready to roll he was suitably, and some would say egotistically and even selfishly, inspired to steal every scene in a manner comparable in modern times to Jack Nicholson's modus operandi. As a producer, Douglas had a reputation of being a compulsively hard worker who expected others to exude the same level of energy. As such, he was typically demanding and direct in his dealing with people who worked on his projects, with his intensity spilling over into all elements of his filmmaking. This was partly due to his high opinion of actors, movies, and movie making. To me it is the most important art form. It is an art, and it includes all the elements of the modern age. He also stressed prioritizing the entertainment goal of films over any messages. You can make a statement, you can say something, but it must be entertaining. As an actor, he dived into every role, dissecting not only his own lines but all the parts in the script to measure the rightness of the role, and he was willing to fight with a director if he felt justified. Melville Shavelson, who produced and directed Cast a Giant Shadow, 1966, said that it didn't take him long to discover what his main problem was going to be in directing Douglas. Kirk Douglas was intelligent. When discussing a script with actors, I have always found it necessary to remember that they never read the other actors' lines, so their concept of the story is somewhat hazy. Kirk had not only read the lines of everyone in the picture, he had also read the stage directions. Kirk, I was to discover, always read every word, discussed every word, always argued every scene, until he was convinced of its correctness. He listened, so it was necessary to fight every minute. For most of his career, Douglas enjoyed good health and what seemed like an inexhaustible supply of energy. Much of that vitality he attributes to his childhood and pre-acting years. The drive that got me out of my hometown and through college is part of the makeup that I utilize in my work. It's a constant fight, and it's tough. His demands on others, however, were an expression of the demands he placed on himself, rooted in his youth. It took me years to concentrate on being a human being. I was too busy scrounging for money and food, and struggling to better myself. Actress Lee Grant, who acted with him and later filmed a documentary about him and his family, notes that even after he achieved worldwide stardom, his father would not acknowledge his success. He said nothing. Ever. Douglas's wife, Anne, similarly attributes his tough childhood to the energy he devotes to acting. He was reared by his mother and his sisters, and as a schoolboy he had to work to help support the family. I think part of Kirk's life has been a monstrous effort to prove himself and gain recognition in the eyes of his father. Not even 4 years of psychoanalysis could alter the drives that began as a desire to prove himself. He credits his mother, Bryna, for instilling in him the importance of gambling on yourself, and he kept her advice in mind when making films. Bryna Productions was named in her honor. Douglas realized that his intense style of acting was something of a shield. Acting is the most direct way of escaping reality, and in my case it was a means of escaping a drab and dismal background. Douglas married twice, first to Diana Dill, on November 2, 1943. They divorced in 1951. The couple had 2 sons, actor Michael Douglas and producer Joel Douglas. Afterwards, he met German-American producer Anne Bidens in Paris while acting on location in Lust for Life. She originally fled from Germany to escape Nazism and survived by putting her multilingual skills to work at a film studio, doing translations for subtitles. They married on May 29, 1954, and in 2014 they celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary at the Greystone Mansion in Beverly Hills. They had 2 sons, producer Peter Douglas and actor Eric Douglas. Eric Douglas died on July 6, 2004, of a drug overdose. Religion and renewed spirituality. In February 1991, Douglas survived a helicopter crash in which 2 people died. This near-death experience sparked a search for meaning by Douglas, which led him, after much study, to embrace the Judaism in which he was raised. He documented this spiritual journey in his book Climbing the Mountain, My Search for Meaning, 2001. In his earlier autobiography, The Ragman's Son, 1988, he recalled, "Years back, I tried to forget that I was a Jew, but later in his career he began coming to grips with what it means to be a Jew, which became a theme in his life." In an interview in 2000, he explained this transition. "Judaism and I parted ways a long time ago, when I was a poor kid growing up in Amsterdam, NY. Back then, I was pretty good in cheddar, so the Jews of our community thought they would do a wonderful thing and collect enough money to send me to a yeshiva to become a rabbi. Holy Moses! That scared the hell out of me. I didn't want to be a rabbi. I wanted to be an actor." Believe me, the members of the Sons of Israel were persistent. "I had nightmares wearing long payos and a black hat. I had to work very hard to get out of it. But it took me a long time to learn that you don't have to be a rabbi to be a Jew." Douglas notes that the underlying theme of some of his films, including The Juggler, 1953, Cast a Giant Shadow, 1966, and Remembrance of Love, 1982, was about a Jew who doesn't think of himself as one, and eventually finds his Jewishness. The Juggler was the first Hollywood feature to be filmed in the newly established state of Israel. Douglas recalls that while there, he saw extreme poverty and food being rationed. But he found it wonderful, finally, to be in the majority. Its producer, Stanley Kramer, tried to portray Israel as the Jews' heroic response to Hitler's destruction. Although his children had a non-Jewish mother, Douglas states that they were aware culturally of his deep convictions, and he never tried to influence their own religious decisions. Douglas' wife, Anne, converted to Judaism before they renewed their wedding vows in 2004. Douglas celebrated a second bar mitzvah ceremony in 1999 at the age of 83. Philanthropy. Douglas and his wife have donated $50 million to various nonprofit causes. These have included the rebuilding of over 400 Los Angeles Unified School District playgrounds that were aged and in need of restoration. They established the N. Douglas Center for Homeless Women at the Los Angeles Mission, which has helped hundreds of women turn their lives around. In Woodland Hills, they enlarged Harry's Haven Alzheimer's unit to care for patients at the Motion Picture Home. And in Culver City, they opened the Kirk Douglas Theater in 2004. They have also supported the N. Douglas Childhood Center at the Sinai Temple of Westwood, and have established scholarship programs at Douglas's alma mater, St. Lawrence University in New York. In March 2015, Kirk and his wife donated $2.3 million to the Children's Hospital Los Angeles. Politics. Douglas and his wife, Anne, have been involved in numerous volunteer and philanthropic activities. They traveled to more than 40 countries, at their own expense, to act as a goodwill ambassador for the U.S. Information Agency, speaking to audiences about why democracy works and what freedom means. In 1980, he flew to Cairo to talk with Egyptian President Anwar Sadat. For all his goodwill efforts, Douglas received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Jimmy Carter in 1981. Upon giving the award, Carter said that Douglas has done this in a sacrificial way, almost invariably without fanfare and without claiming any personal credit or acclaim for himself. In subsequent years, he has testified before Congress about abuse of the elderly. Douglas has been a lifelong supporter of the Democratic Party. He has on occasion written letters to politicians who were friends. He notes in his memoir, Let's Face It, 2007, that he felt compelled to write to former President Jimmy Carter in 2006 in order to stress that Israel is the only successful democracy in the Middle East, and has had to endure many wars against overwhelming odds. If Israel loses one war, they lose Israel. Health. On January 28, 1996, he suffered a severe stroke, impairing his ability to speak. Doctors told his wife that unless there was rapid improvement, it was likely he would permanently lose his voice. After a long, daily, regime of voice therapy over the following months, his capacity to speak came back, but still limited. He was able to accept an honorary Academy Award 2 months later in March and thank the audience. Douglas wrote about this experience in a book, My Stroke of Luck, which he hoped would be an operating manual for others on how to handle a stroke victim in their own family. Hobbies. Douglas blogs semi-regularly, originally hosted on MySpace. His posts have been hosted by the Huffington Post since 2012. He is believed to be the oldest celebrity blogger in the world.